Today, the microphone gets turned around. I'm not the host, I'm actually the guest. This is my appearance on the Service Design Show, and I think you'll find it worth your time. Please enjoy this special episode of Disruptor Confessions. Hi, this is John, and you're watching the Service Design Show. This is episode 254.
Honestly, it feels like there's a bit of a collective panic right now. Everyone is trying to master the machine, learning to prompt, figuring out vibe coding, and trying not to get left behind. But what if the ultimate survival skill for this era has absolutely nothing to do with technology? What if staying relevant is actually about doubling down on the things a machine cannot do? My name is Marc Fonteijn, and if you are new here, welcome to the Service Design Show. This is the place where we talk to people who are actually figuring out how to design services that work for humans, for business, and of course for our planet. Today's guest is John Ayers. John is an industry veteran who says he already survived about 5 midlife crises. He has pivoted from advertising to the music industry and from film into service design and data. He's lived through enough industry-ending shifts to know how to actually navigate them. Right now, he's the host of the Disruptor's Confessions podcast. While a few people are building with AI and a few others are ignoring it completely, John is focused on the 80% of us in the middle, the curious, the confused, and the slightly overwhelmed. In this episode, we talk about why chasing every single shiny new tool is actually a career trap. We dig into his AI blueprints and how to translate human personas into digital agents without things getting weird or dehumanized. But maybe my favorite part of the conversation with John was when John broke down the anatomy of an agent. He moves past the idea of AI as just a widget and looks at how to ground it in real behavior. If you are feeling the pressure of the current market, this is the roadmap you've been looking for. Let's jump in and make sure to stick around till the end because I'll be back with some final reflections. Welcome to the show, John.
Hey, Mark, how are you?
I'm doing well. I was just telling you that I'm super excited, and at the same time, I'm sort of feeling exhausted and depleted, and that is all thanks to the topic we'll be exploring today, namely the hype around and the anxiety and the fear and the opportunities around AI. We're going to sort of try to dissect what is real, what is important, and what are all the things that we shouldn't bother about. But before we get into that, I think, John, it's interesting to look at where we are as listeners of the Service Design Show. I think a lot of folks right now feel somewhere in the middle. We are not developers, we are not engineers. At the same time, we aren't sort of oblivious, and we follow LinkedIn. We see a lot of cool stuff coming out, people posting a lot of cool stuff, but maybe we are sort of not sure what to do with this. Like there's a new tool, new cool project every day. Everybody's vibe coding. Everybody's building out in the open. That makes people anxious. Now, the reason I'm saying this is you could call this a disruption, what's going on, but this isn't your first rodeo. You've seen a few disruptions happen, and maybe it's interesting if we start there. Like, tell us about the disruptions that you've been part of.
Well, first of all, Mark, thanks for having me on the show. Yeah, I think you touched on a couple things. One, you just mentioned LinkedIn, and I find it interesting talking about disruption and change. I find myself going to LinkedIn because there's so much change every day, and I just want to hear and see what people are posting. I try not to get sucked into the algorithm, but it is crazy the amount of change that's occurring. 2-3 years ago, we're recording this in 2026, just a few years ago, you could see change maybe every couple months or every couple weeks. Now it's literally daily, if not hourly. So I find that interesting. My own path, Mark, yeah, it is interesting. So I'll try to hit the highlights, but you mentioned the word disruption. So I have witnessed, but it took me a while to get there, that I have been either disrupted or I have been doing the disruption my entire career. And what I mean by that is I happen to be, coming out of college when the Apple Macintosh came out. I was doing desktop publishing and no one else really knew what it was. And I was actually teaching desktop publishing. And then I was doing desktop publishing for a Macintosh computer magazine. And it literally was disrupting traditional linotype print publishing with a little Macintosh. Fast forward, I'm working in traditional advertising. I'm an art director. I'm a creative director working in the Adobe stack, heavy Adobe. And I was doing basically storyboards on a computer for building out TV commercials and building out billboards campaigns. Instead of the old school, everything was starting to move to the computer. And I was the young kid at the time disrupting traditional agency methods. Fast forward again, a few years later, I find myself at Warner Music Group in Los Angeles. And I'm at Warner Music when basically people were selling CDs at stores at the time. And MP3 file compression came out, then Napster, then iTunes. And I saw the entire music industry in front of me completely be disrupted, completely change. Fast forward again, I got out of the music industry, worked in the film and television industry, and I was literally in a room when someone revealed this product that I had never heard of called TiVo, and you could record shows and not have to watch commercials. And then I saw VHS go to DVD, go to Blu-ray, go to streaming. So yes, I've seen disruption the entire career. And around that time, Mark, and I'll wrap up here by saying I found myself at that point finally realizing I'd either been disrupted or I was doing the disruption. And that's when I pivoted into journey mapping and experiential and service design. And it took me down a whole nother path.
Okay. I'm having a lot of conversations about disruption. People sort of are often stating that disruption is something which is quite recent, it's new, like disruption is the thing. But when you think about it and you look at the examples that you just shared, disruption has been with us forever and ever. But somehow this time feels different, at least to me. I don't know, does it feel different to you as well?
Well, thank you. Great question, Mark. It is different and it feels different. And I'll kind of give you some framework to your point. I just shared a little bit of my own career path, the first half, but that's only going back 3-4 decades, which might seem long. But and I'm not a history buff, but if we go back literally in historical times to the agricultural revolution literally changed mankind. It changed the trajectory of our life. It changed the duration of life itself, how long we were living. But it was centuries in its process of the agricultural revolution. If we fast forward to the industrial revolution, again, massive at a global scale, not just a job or a skill or a company or even an industry. Globally, it changed humanity. And I don't see AI or agentic that we're living through now as an evolution of the digital revolution. I think AI is like agriculture revolution and industrial revolution. And I see it in this way. I think the digital revolution that we've witnessed the last 50, 60, 70 years is really an extension of the industrial revolution. It moved kind of the manpower, physical labor into digital. AI feels more radical than that. AI feels like it is changing the knowledge work. AI feels like the industrial revolution or the agricultural revolution. To your question or your point about this feels different, it feels different, Mark, because it is different. And here's why. A couple things, the pace and the scale. So agricultural, centuries. Industrial, decades. This, as we just spoke about, is daily. It's just the exponential change that is occurring at such a global scale.
All right, let's take this statement for being true for the moment. But then we need to unpack the notion of change, because we see change every day. And like, what makes this change similar to, like you said, the other revolutions, rather than just being the change that we've always witnessed around us?
Yeah, I think there's something, and there's people smarter than I on this topic, but this notion of knowledge work in that it can actually replicate the human process, the way we think. Now, there's a lot of argument about what it's actually doing. And in fact, you and I speak about this a little bit that we end up driving these tools, these LLMs, these models, to do things on our behalf for our company or other clients. So who's really in charge? Well, I think that's the concern. That's the question we have. Super exciting, right? So what is the change going to become? And I think if we think about that, the change can be curing, cancer, can be, solving climate crisis, can be radical in that level. But we have to be mindful that the kind of work that we're able to do is happening at such a rapid pace. And if it gets into that knowledge work, who's driving it? Who's owning the decisioning if literally agentic capabilities are making the agent to agent decisions? So I think that feels different to me. That feels everything prior to this moment in history. We were still kind of in charge.
Mm.
We were offloading some capabilities. Just take a calculator. You can multiply or do mathematics without thinking about it. But we were still in charge. This feels different because we're starting to give way to agentic capabilities.
Yeah, and this has the potential to become a very philosophical conversation, but let's do our best to ground it
Yeah,
as much as
I
possible and
love it.
keep
Yeah.
um the and I'm guilty of that as well, but my brain works in metaphors and analogies, and like I can totally see where what we've seen in the past were basically faster horses. Like it was sure a car is not a horse, but it's a means of travel and it gets you from A to B. And then like the phone, the mobile phone, like
Right.
those were all evolution of something that was already established. Now with AI, like maybe you could argue that the big difference here is that it's generative, that it's creating things that are not, I don't know, derived. Like again, there will be a lot of arguments and counter arguments for people saying that it's just one big pattern machine, which it actually is. But it's again, it feels different because it's generative, at least to me.
I agree. I completely agree. It feels different because I think it is different.
So what
I
it
mean,
like? What is different for you?
we're taking the knowledge that, and quite honestly, we do have to be careful about being philosophical here, but I will say that in the LLM models themselves, and I've spoken to people who study and do red teaming around the data, it's not the data of everything known to mankind. It's a data that we've captured primarily like on the internet, on the digital component. So if there's a little village somewhere that's not connected, that data is not, and that's where the bias and hallucination of these models, these predictive capabilities have really gone off the charts. And I think we're getting better at that, but we have to be mindful of what you just alluded to, that we're not there yet. However, we're down a trajectory that this becomes knowledge, which has really always been that's separated, that's differentiated humanity from the machine, humanity from everything prior. We've been kind of in charge. Now, I think there is something about, and we'll probably jump back into service design because I'm finding now that the humanity in the work is so much more important than it maybe has been for the last 5 or 10 or 15 years. Bringing that humanity, bringing in those interactions with the machines, is really important because of what we're talking about. Is the knowledge work going to get away from who's in charge? Are we as human beings going to be making the decisions when we already are seeing some of these capabilities of one person deploying a handful of like C-level agents that then have teams of agents underneath them? So you have one person literally running a small company, or potentially in a couple of years, an entire organization based on AI agents.
Yeah, and maybe it's a good moment to unpack that and get practical and tangible because
Yeah.
I'm I'm living in the AI agents world a lot, but I can imagine not all of our listeners are currently. So
Yeah.
to go on to your example, I'll share something that I was and am working on, and I'm curious how you see that and how that fits into your perspective. So one of the things where I literally created a team is to analyze. I created a newsroom. So I was imagining the New York Times and how they do journalism. I have a bunch of data which we collect every year, and I was thinking like, okay, which people does the New York Times put in a room together to actually create interesting pieces? And I created roles, and those are like, we have to just be very practical. Those are just text files where you describe, okay, what is your capability, what is your responsibility. And then I had a data scientist, I had a reviewer, I had a chief officer. Again, text files, just descriptions. And I created workflows. So basically, how do we get to an article? Well, you start reading, you start doing the data science, and then you come together. And at the end, another text file comes out, which is an article. And that is, I think, what you're alluding to as well, right? This type of orchestration organization.
It's two things I want to, first of all, super interesting. I love what you're building out. There's a couple things about it, though, I want to poke at. One, some people listening or watching this will be like, I think I understand it. But if they worked in a newsroom, if they were at the New York Times for the last 20 years, they would have deep, what I call domain expertise around the process. They would have deep knowledge. But if you were trying to build a cancer research institute, it would be difficult for you. You don't have that kind of domain expertise. You would want to go to that. So that's one thing I want to call out. I think the domain expertise aspect of what you're talking about is incredibly critical. So think about an auto manufacturer versus a newsroom versus a cancer research. Radically different knowledge bases, radically different domain expertise. So I think I just want to call that out. I think to me, that is also super important in the time that we're in today. So that's number one. Number two, it gets back to the other thing that I wanted to touch on, Mark, and that is some people know your show probably brings in most people who have an understanding of service design and some of the things we're talking about agentic and workflows and kind of unmap, like, figuring out flows and mapping kind of an experience. However, I often talk about the 80%. Let me explain. I think right now we're living in a world where you have like a top 10% of the population that is driving and living and breathing and eating and sleeping AI and digital and technology. You could even call the top 5 companies that are driving most of this, and everybody's swirling or connected to those agentic companies, those AI companies. Then you have the other extreme, the other end of the spectrum, the other 10% on the far end, which I look up at basically the unengaged. They're essentially maybe a retired plumber, or it just is not on their radar. They might hear about it, they just don't care. It's just not of interest to them. So you have these extremes of 10% driving it, 10% they don't have any of what we're talking about on their radar. My focus has really been in the last few years on the 80%, trying to make sense of what is going on, the pace and scale of change. Some people may have no idea what GitHub is. They may have no idea what an API is. They have no idea what agentic means or an LLM means. The 10% that are driving it and the 10% on the other end, I can't worry about that. But the 80% in the middle, I'm kind of like hyper focused on helping making sense of that. I don't know if that helps at all.
Yeah, no, for sure. And let's assume that most of us listening right now are in those 80%. We are not AI experts. We don't want to become AI experts. We want to use AI as a means to an end. And therefore, we need to know what we need to know, but we don't need to know how transformer models work or GitHub or whatever, right?
Well, I think that's exactly right. And I think, to be honest with you, what we're finding is that we're going to meet in the middle because we're human beings. I mean, I really do. I think the constant,
unpack that. Yeah.
The constant is, I think there's 2 constants. One, humanity, human beings, and we have to be mindful of that. But then the disruption, the fact is that change is constant. I think it was Ginny Rometty at IBM who used to say, be comfortable or with the uncomfortable, or something to that effect. Be okay with change. So we have 2 things going on. We have constant change, disruption occurring at a constant pace and an accelerated pace. but we have to be mindful of the humanity in it. And I think the 80% in the middle are feeling that. They feel it around job loss, their skills, their company, their industry. What does the landscape look like? And I think service design, humanity, experiential design, human-centered design with technology, with the capabilities really sits at the center.
Can you unpack that a little bit more? Because
Yeah.
what we're seeing around us, at least what I'm seeing, is that it's not humanity that sits at the center right now, but as often with these new emergent technologies, it's the technology that sits at the center and it's driving the innovation, it's driving the capital, it's driving the labor. It doesn't feel like humanity is at the center.
Yeah. So, Mark, I came across you about a decade ago when I was diving deep into customer journey mapping, user experience design, and service design. And it really became a light bulb moment. As I mentioned, I was a creative director in the creative field. And around that time, I really felt like I needed to get ahead of it. I think that's the point we're at now. To your question, to your point about we feel like we're almost on the outside looking in at the AI, like we're almost just trying to surf the wave and feel like we're getting crushed by the wave every day. I think 2 years ago we could surf. Now we're crushed every day. So how do we bring human-centered design into AI? So when I kind of came across you and when I was diving deep into like some service blueprinting, quite honestly, I was trying to map 10, 15 years ago, I was trying to map that front stage experience and the backstage experience across a journey flow, an orchestration, an end to end, if you will. And you could bring that into any kind of industry. And I kind of got away from that for several reasons. I got deeper into SaaS applications like Salesforce and bringing kind of capabilities of like hyperscalers like Google and big, AWS, et cetera. So I was deeper into like the data side of the business the last decade or so. But here we are, fast forward, ChatGPT gets launched now over 3-4 years ago, and everything changes again. And right now I am dusting off my service design skills. So when you said, let's get very tactical, practical, I'm literally building out what I'm calling AI blueprints, AI service blueprints. They're literally saying, okay, you have a persona, let's take customer service, because that's a big role that's often basically being blown up by AI. It's an easy one for an AI agent to take over. However, I don't know anybody who's listening is happy with
The
an agent
chatbot.
versus
Yeah.
a human being. But I will say what I'm seeing now is a massive need is service design thinking brought into what you're talking about is this AI agent capability. And here's why. If you have a human persona that is a service representative, a customer care representative who's on a headset, on a phone, trying to answer a return or a policy question or something, they have kind of a personality and a human experience to them and empathy. And we're moving that into an agent. So my point in this point is identify the human persona and identify exactly their questions, their challenges, their skills, the human being that's doing that job now, and then replicate that so you have an AI agent persona. So if you're going to move a human experience, a human skill into an agent, make sure you understand the persona of what that human being is doing currently. If they're a marketing strategy person, if they're a customer service, if they're a sales, business development, sales, every one of those individuals has a persona and you need to identify their goals, their pain, their etc. Then you can map that into an AI persona that an agent is going to take on. Number one. Number two, if you're mapping a journey experience, selling a product or service or what have you, you then have to think about that above the line, that front stage, and look at every step along the way and find out where is there friction? Where's the pain point? And if there's a pain point, can an agent help solve that or improve that experience for the customer, right? And then on the backstage, similarly, what I'm finding, Mark, is you can break AI or agents in a lot of different ways. I break it into like 2 or 3 big buckets. One is what I just touched on. How might an AI agent improve the experience for the customer? And then at the backstage, how might an AI agent increase the efficiencies for the flow underneath at the employee experience, the systems, if you will. And from those two, if you can increase the efficiencies for the backstage of the employee experience, you can then improve, the goal would be to improve the experience for the front stage, the customer facing. And in by so doing those two, you might have a third aspect, which is freeing up time to become more strategic in the overall arc that you're trying to achieve. So that's how I really am breaking it down. Like AI agent persona is based on a real human persona, still thinking about traditional journey mapping and blueprinting, but then looking at, and I'll say, how might we, rather than let's put an agent there, let's put an agent there. Because sometimes an agent isn't what we need or what we want.
So this makes a lot of sense, and I'm hearing already the critiques, and I'm seeing the tomatoes flying around to all of us because trying, like, to which extent should we want this, and to which extent is this actually feasible? The examples so far of bringing personality into agents, like, I feel that's been quite a disaster. Like it feels super artificial. It's fake. If anything, it's annoying. It's distracting. That's one side of the argument. Like, should we actually and can we actually do this? And then the flip side is people will be saying, all right, so if we're trying to bring the humanity into the machine, like, aren't we being sort of actually dehumanizing the work, because the people who are doing the work, like, sure, we're freeing them up, but the reality will be that a lot of these people will be freed up to actually do what? So two questions there, right?
Yeah, I have a couple thoughts. So you said, can we and should we? Which are really critical questions. Can we? Perhaps, yeah, probably
Maybe.
can. And
if not today, like in a year, right?
Can't today, tomorrow, next year, right? I mean, can we? Probably. Should we? And I think the should we goes back to what I was saying earlier. We have got to keep the humanity in the process. Yesterday, literally trying to get a medicine from the pharmacy, going through insurance and going through, the provider, agent to agent, chatbot to chatbot, a nightmare. Still don't have the medication, still don't have pharmacy, a nightmare. Just getting on the phone or speaking with a real human being would have been a lot better. So the can and should, I think, is a really, really critical piece of this. So I would stop there. Let me ask what you think about the can versus should.
Well, while you were sharing this, like, the first thing that actually came to my mind was that it feels like we're in a stage where we're actually dehumanizing the services around us, right? Instead of making them more human. And maybe there is a lack of service design not being involved in this process so far, but, like, to me, we are dehumanizing a lot of the things around us.
So, Mark, you're not going to get an argument from me on that. I have to agree, and I think that is where we're at today. So let me bring in one other observation. I'm heavily focused on change and disruption, and what it's doing to business at a macro level, and then down to kind of some of the aspects we're talking about at the very interaction. But what I think I'm observing anecdotally is you have three different things going on. You have the individuals, people like you and I and others who may be watching or listening, who are pulling out Gemini or ChatGPT or Cloud Code or whatever, OpenCloud. They're using these tools, right? And they're building these workflows, and they're kind of blowing their own mind. They go to bed, they wake up, they're building things that just literally a couple months weren't even possible, right? So you have maybe that 10% or those that are on the, so you have some people who are just blown away and they're way out in front. Those individuals are typically working for an organization that is behind where that individual person is.
Mm-hmm.
So the skills and capabilities of the individual is way ahead of the enterprise, of the company. And that company and that business and that industry they may be in is way ahead of policy, of government, of guidelines and guardrails. So the governance that is required is 2 steps behind of what is actually occurring. And I think that is the friction I'm seeing right now in the market. So I think we have to, I'll be careful of the word alignment, but I think we have to align what the individual is capable of doing, what they can do, with what a company is currently able to do and what policy is actually trying to govern. To me, I think that's where we find ourselves today.
So, again, it's going to be a boring episode because I think we'll agree a lot with each other. But that leaves us like right now in a very precarious state where the rules are being made by the ones who have the most money, who go the fastest, rather than the people who are mindful, careful, deliberate about the choices and the should we do, considering those questions, right? And
Well,
what does it? Yeah.
Well, I just have to call it out like I see it. I mean, we have companies, right? Let's just call Meta, Mark Zuckerberg, Demis Hassabis, Google DeepMind, Dario Amodei, right? Anthropic. The list goes on. Sam Altman, OpenAI. So this isn't democratized in the sense of thousands of companies across the globe trying to figure it out. And there's certainly others, but just kind of naming a few individuals who are typically aligned with these companies who are driving this. None of these were household names just 5 years ago. None of these companies were household, well, maybe a few, but none of them were really household names like they are today. Now, I'm not saying only those individuals, but the small circles around them are driving this. Now, having said that, I am not anti-AI. I think we can cure cancer. I think we can solve, world problems. However, wouldn't it be great just to solve the pharmacy issue I had or the traffic problems we have in our city? So like, to me, there's some very basic things. So how do we square that circle, Mark, to your point? Here's what I think is happening. When I mention individuals are way out in front of their company or their enterprise, the company, the business model, business way out in front of policy, we have to come in alignment with that. I think in the United States, we do see some of that starting to occur. I don't know how it's going to occur globally. It has to. But I think that is the biggest friction we're seeing right now, because I don't see those 5 or 6 companies at the top slowing down. The only thing that's slowing them down or us down in this trajectory is energy, is electricity and center processing. And so we are at a pivotal point. I think, I'll call it a strategic inflection point for the world that we're living in. I have some other thoughts, but I'll pause there.
Okay, no, I want to hear your thoughts. Go on.
Well, I think, Mark, the other thing that I would say is, I am seeing where the rubber hits the road, if that's the right phrase, where this friction really becomes known in business, in my day-to-day, is this, let's build a new tool, let's build a new widget, we've got a new technology, hey, we can use, these tools. What might a company be authorized for their employees to use with a single sign-on? Yes, you're authorized to use Microsoft Copilot inside of Teams, or you're authorized to use Google Gemini. So an organization may authorize their employees to use tools, whether they're publicly, available or built within that organization. That's occurring, right? That's occurring right now. But to our discussion around service and your brand of service design, there is something missing. There is something missing, and that is the service experience. That is the experiential side of this. Because yes, the individual can build these things. I see it in my own work. You and I talked about it earlier. In my colleagues, in my clients, they're building these tools. But when we think about it at the enterprise level and how we're going to integrate them with people, with real human beings, the third piece that I didn't talk on, we have to figure that out. So I'm really bullish on service blueprinting for AI, so AI blueprinting, if you will, and AI personas. And I think you're gonna get some tomatoes thrown at us, like you said. The third piece, I kind of have created something called the anatomy of an agent. The anatomy of an agent. So what do I mean by that? So someone who knows APIs and knows Git and knows like Claude Code, they can build an agent. And they probably have multiple agents running at home on their own laptop, and they're doing stuff at work. And then you have like a sales rep talking to a customer or a client or a prospect, and they really don't know how to build an agent. But the customer, the client, or the industry, take anything, auto manufacturing, pharmaceutical, retail, grocery store, what have you. They have a need, might be abandoned shopping cart, right? It might be ordering, new leather seats for my automobile. Whatever the use case is, there's a need. So the salesperson, the business development is talking to the customer. And over here, you have someone who has this deep technical expertise, and there's a gap between those two. So what I have started to really develop is what I'm calling kind of the anatomy of an agent. What is the objective that we're trying to solve, which is the business goal? That's over here in left field. That's way over here. What's the goal? What's the friction? What's the pain point we're trying to solve? What's the use case? And then over here, the bleeding edge capabilities of what actually is available today, not 2 months ago, not 2 months from now, today, and what might we use to solve for that business problem. And that's where I'm bringing that together literally on a one pager. How do we solve for that together? What's the pain? What's the objective? And what technology might we bring? The challenge that I'm finding is not a lot of people are doing that in real time. And they are kind of doing it. We saw why pilots failed in 2025. We saw these McKinsey and other reports, 95% of AI pilots, POCs are failing, or they're abandoning them. They're not seeing value because they built a widget and they tried to plug it in. So I'm saying, hey, listen, macro, think about the end-to-end service blueprinting, front stage, backstage, end-to-end experience. But then when you go deep into a specific friction or a pain point or a use case, don't just build a widget. Think about what the human being is doing now. That's that persona, if you will. And what is the human persona, and can we build an AI persona? And then if an agent or an AI capability is helpful in that experience, in that interaction, do what I call is kind of the anatomy of an agent to see that business problem and the technology available at the time to solve for that. I know that's pretty heady and a lot, but does that
yeah,
flow?
there's something to unpack there. So if we are moving to a world where we will have agents doing things for us, helping us to achieve the things we want to achieve with as little effort, time, investment as possible, what I see happening, and the history has shown this as well, I think, is that, again, coming back to an earlier point, initially this will be driven by technology. So somebody who knows how to wrangle this technology, how to use these tools, will say, you know what, I see that you have a pain, I see that there is a need, I know how this technology works, I'll put something together and call it an agent, and this will help you fix that issue, and we're done. Like, design experience is nowhere to be seen in that equation, at least from my perspective. And I think that, like, that's hard. Like, nobody wants us. We are needed, but we're not wanted.
Well, and there's something else going on here. As I mentioned, I used to work in film and television, and I would sit in edit bays, and there used to be a writer, a director, a producer, an editor. You had all these different skills, and they were very specific individuals with that experience and that knowledge, and they would bring that in. But over time, instead of cutting a piece of film with a knife and splicing it together, you had digital tools. You had like Adobe After Effects, and you had Final Cut Pro. And what they started to call it, not a producer and an editor, they jokingly would say you have a predator, a producer and an editor as one person. And we're seeing that now. We're seeing the compression. When I speak of marketing, I talk about the marketing funnel being compressed. But what you're alluding to, Mark, is we see the skills and the experience being compressed. So I might have a whiteboard, right? I'm pointing at my wall behind me. Like, I might have a whiteboard where I sketch an idea, and then I might go onto my laptop and like vibe code something. So my sketch becomes a vibe code. And then, that was maybe last year. Now I just open my microphone and I talk, and something just produces something. So these skills are being compressed, right? So you have idea generation from a whiteboard marker, from a Photoshop comp. All of those things are now being compressed, and that is also changing the game. So there's a compression of these capabilities and skills. And I think, to your point, that's also why some of this is being lost in translation, if you will.
And well, that is actually a glimmer of hope and optimism for us as service design professionals, because the thing that's being democratized and the thing that's being made more accessible is the ability to build, produce, ship things. Something that was before, you needed a degree in engineering, software engineering to get it done. That is like, again, being democratized. What is not being democratized is or are some of the key skills that we as a design community have: curiosity, understanding people, asking the important why questions. So if we approach things from that perspective and we use your predator analogy, like what would we be capable of if we are actually bringing in the technology aspect, sort of upskilling ourselves there and leveraging the skills, abilities, traits that we already always have had? That's going to make for quite an explosive combination, right?
Well, I think you touched on something else that I would love to just mention, and that is some of the skills that, and this is pretty well known now, those that are following the space, the skills that we thought would never go away, which are these kind of technical, digital, mathematical, white-collar job skills. We're seeing those are going to be disrupted more quickly and probably more widely than these traditional skills of a plumber or an electrician or a nurse or a emergency medical technician that works with the fire department, right? So these skills that are in the real world, as it were, that have human to human experience and personal experience, are becoming really more important than others. Now, what I find interesting here, and maybe this is a little bit what you were just alluding to, when we think about the humanity, and you use the word curiosity, I am seeing, and I'm talking to a lot of people about this, in the market, we're seeing job losses in the kind of white collar. So what does that mean? Well, not everybody, like 20 years ago, not everybody's going to become a coder. I mean, I don't know Python. I don't know Java. I know basic front end, but so now not everybody's going to become a nurse or an emergency medical technician or a plumber, electrician. So where does that leave everybody? And I think what people are already starting to sense, and I'm pretty bullish on, is what you just said: curiosity, empathy, strategic thinking, the humanity, taste, sensibility. These things are not really being replicated by what we're seeing in AI today. The humanity of what we used to call as soft skills are now, I'm starting to lean into the phrase durable skills. Not my term, I've stolen it from others, but this idea of durable skills is becoming more valuable. And why is it more valuable? It goes around what you just touched on: curiosity, taste, sensibility, because all of the other components are going to be done by the AI capabilities that are just maturing and growing at such a rapid pace. Real quick, I will also say, just recently, there's a massive amount of engineers being hired. So even though people are saying, oh, coders are going to lose their jobs, yes, but right now there's an uptick in that skill set, which is ironic because I think the uptick, and I'm not projecting, but I'm hearing there's an uptick today only for those jobs to go away over time. So I think this notion of durable skills from a service design thinking, a service blueprinting, experiential human-centered design, I think those are going to become incredibly valuable to tie everything together.
They were always already incredibly valuable, but now, because of the other things that are being commoditized in an extremely fast pace, the things that are harder to commoditize will sort of emerge and surface as the things that are most valuable. Now, let's try to bring this back to day-to-day reality.
Yeah.
I'm a service design professional. I love what I do. I'm very passionate about creating a more humane world. I'm also on LinkedIn. I'm getting anxious by all the projects that I see come by, a new tool every day, the headlines where everybody's being laid off, like you said. I'm seeing job layoffs. What do like today, tomorrow? What do we do with this whole situation?
Yeah, Mark, this is kind of building off of what we were just talking about, this notion of durable skills. I run my own podcast called Disruptor Confessions, and I ran a series with AI filmmakers several months back, and I interviewed. This is a great example of what you just asked around what should people do, and it really opened my mind up to what they were doing. These creatives, these filmmakers, these incredible talent. And I interviewed people from all over the world, literally Canada, Europe, India, North America. So I got a wide swath of these creatives. And every one of them said almost the exact same thing. Don't chase the tools. Don't chase the tools. And in their filmmaking process, everyone almost verbatim said, it's all about the storytelling. And what that really told me, in their world, the technology, and they can speak a whole nother language around the tools about Kling and Sora and like all the tools that creatives are using around the film industry. And it's quite remarkable what's happening over there. But what they said is don't chase the tools because the tools are going to constantly improve. So you have to go into the skills that are more human. And they talked about storytelling. So when you bring it into service design, I don't think it's radically different. Be careful of getting sucked into the hype of the tools, of the technology, of the disruption that's happening at the technology stage. You have to stay informed. But I go back to the durable skills, being curious, listening, going into a conversation and a meeting, being that kind of odd unicorn in the room and asking kind of the logical questions that other people are afraid to ask. And what are those? Well, who are you trying to serve? What's the key pain point? What's the business objective? Don't talk about, what LLM you're using. What's the agent going to do? Talk about who the human being is that you're trying to serve. Are you trying to increase efficiencies? Are you trying to improve an experience? What's the end-to-end? How does this digital space connect with a tangible in the real world space occur? Those are so critically important. They're being lost in the conversation. So I would lean into those durable skills.
Awesome that you're sharing this, and I hope that this gives our listeners confidence and hope for the future, because I do agree with you. But the reality again right now is that it is the tools, it is the things the artifacts that are being created that are driving the headlines. Nobody will cheer you on for asking the hard, important questions. And how do we escape? And how do we not, like you said, get sucked into chasing every new tool that comes out on Git tomorrow?
Well, let me share what I think is a secret that people aren't really talking about. Let me share with you how I see the pain point evolving as we move forward in the next 6 to 8, 9 months. 2025, we saw a lot of individual agents. I'm going to build a customer service agent. I'm going to build a sales development rep agent, right? And a lot of those pilots failed because of what we're talking about. It really wasn't thought through. It was a shiny new object. It was a widget. It's as if you built a steering wheel without really thinking about the entire car, the automobile, right? So what are we going to see? We're already seeing the individual trying to build multiple agents or an entire company based on agents, right? C-suite with executives and then teams of agents building underneath that. But bringing that into the real world at the enterprise scale, it breaks down pretty quickly. And there's a couple things that I would like to share. I happen to work with Salesforce a lot. Salesforce's product has a massive install of commerce, sales, service, and marketing globally at large-scale enterprise corporations. They have a product called Agentforce that is embedded agentic capability in the flow of work within their organization. But they also build out a lot of integrations with hyperscalers, AWS. AWS has SageMaker, Google has Vertex. And you could go on down the line, Adobe, right? Every product out there that has install implementations at large-scale corporations have agentic capabilities. Now you have these suites of AI coming out of Meta and Anthropic and Gemini. So what's going to occur? You're going to try to build agent-to-agent worlds. And some of these, and this isn't just me. I mean, I've heard Dario Amodei and others talk about similar challenges. You now have agents who might live in like a SaaS application, and you might have agents that are being built from the ground up, like homegrown agentic capabilities from maybe the IT department. And then you might have a hyperscaler coming in and saying, well, we have pre-built capabilities and you can bring your own model and you can have zero copy with data. So who's really orchestrating that? Not just on the technology and the API call and the data integration. At the end of the day, someone has to think through that. So the experience of that is once again a service design challenge. Now it's a little bit of a shift from what we might have seen in the 2000, the .com era of trying to map service blueprinting in the 2000s and 2010s. We have to think about it from an agentic lens. But I think that is a hidden secret that we're going to start to see emerge is agent to agent, and where I think service design is really going to have to insert. Those who have those skills are going to have to start to become the loudest voice in the room and start to ask the questions that other people are afraid to ask.
This is interesting, and I know we're sort of short on time, but I still want to explore this. If the future is agent-to-agent communication interfaces, which I think to a certain extent it's definitely going that way, there is no experience in that interface, in the dialogue, in that communication. And experience is our bread and butter, is the thing that we understand, that we thrive on. Like, what is, like, I see a big risk where we become process mappers and process engineers.
Earlier you said we got to be careful of being too philosophical, and it's hard not to. I think we have to be mindful that actually one of the other episodes, I asked this very question. If agents do all the work, what becomes of us? And I think it gets it to the very heart of what you're talking about. What's our purpose? If we project forward, not 6 months, but 6 years, and we do have 25, 30% global unemployment or 50% global unemployment. I don't think that's the case, but if, right? And we have massive agents doing all this work. Well, what is the experience we're really living with at that point? What is our purpose? So I think we do have a question which goes back to that. We have to insert the human experience inside the technology. I want to go back to also, Mark, we have to be mindful of the here and now. When I go into customer engagements, quite honestly, I'm going to smile. They're still trying to get their data in order. So yeah, they're trying to play with agents, but they're still like, they have databases living all over the place. There's spreadsheets sitting on someone's laptop. So the reality, like there's this 10%, like I mentioned earlier, 10% are like, oh, we're all going to be out of jobs and Agentic's going to take over. The reality is we're not there yet at the enterprise scale. I think it's coming fast, but I think there's a reality we have to live at.
I feel that we sort of touched and explored a lot of different topics, and it might have felt all over the place, which is okay, and that is part of the topic that we're exploring. But if somebody made it to this point, John, what do you hope is one thing that they'll take away?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. For me, I mentioned the 80% in the middle. I came out of the Macintosh industry. When the Apple Macintosh launched, they called it the computer for the rest of us. So when I launched the Disruptor Confessions website and podcast and newsletter, I literally said, I'm going to steal that line. I call it the podcast for the rest of us. What I'm trying to do is make sense of the pace and scale of the disruption, Mark, that's occurring. Because I think a lot of people right now are concerned. They're questioning their skills. They're questioning their next job, the work that they're doing, the industry they're in, the market landscape, and they're not sure where to go with it. So my wish is that people just kind of settle down, know what they have, don't chase the tools, lean into your durable soft skills, be curious. And to be honest with you, Mark, if we recorded this 6 months ago or 6 months from now in the future, it probably would be a different conversation. So I think we have to acknowledge we're at a time of change. It's moving fast. Keep your balance. Don't lose your humanity. Take that walk. Go meditate. Step away from the screen. Find your peace. Find your balance, and then you'll be able to give kind of the thoughtful insights that you are good at.
I'll make sure to add all the relevant links, the podcast, the newsletter, Disruptor Confessions, so that if people, like, I would encourage them to listen at least to a few episodes and then sort of get a sense for the things that you're exploring. John, one last thing before we wrap this one up. What I like to do here on this podcast is to actually end with a question, because I do think that questions are more interesting, more fun, and more valuable than answers. What is the thing that you'd like us to think about after this?
So I think it's kind of a theme of what we've talked about. I'm very excited about, we almost have a new lease on the opportunity for humanity with the Gen AI tools that we have in front of us. I think there's a couple key pieces that I hope people take away. Know that you're not alone. Know that a lot of people are trying to unpack what's happening. And if you are in the experiential industry, if you have some of those skills around service design, you're sitting in a really strong position to bring the humanity into the technology. So one thing I would hope people get away from this conversation is you should be proud and strong in the room. You should be the one voice that are asking the questions that other people are nervous about asking. Because I think people are diving into the tech, but they have to bring the humanity back in. And I think that's where we're at right now.
So what's the question you want to give us?
I would ask this question. What do you want 2 years to look like from now? Because if we think about 2 years, we can kind of project forward a little bit. 10 years too far, 6 months too close. But go forward 2 years from now. What do you want it to look like for yourself, for your family, and for the people around you, your company, your job, and drive towards that? I would ask yourself, what do you want 2 years from now to look like?
Important question to think about, not just today, but any day of the year. So let's absolutely do this, and not during New Year's Eve where you're setting goals all the time. John, I feel we've kind of explored this topic a lot more, and like you said, if we do it in 3 months, it will be probably a different conversation. But this is also interesting. It's a snapshot in time. It's a time capsule. If we go back, we'll probably laugh at all the things that we mentioned here. But nevertheless, I hope that this inspired some of our listeners to have more confidence, have more faith, have more trust, be less anxious, and sort of maybe stop scrolling LinkedIn as much. So, John, thanks again for coming on, sharing, and I will definitely be listening to your podcast as well.
Well, Mark, thank you so much. I love the conversation. As you can see, I'm passionate about it. I think it's critically important, and thank you for having me on the show.
Welcome back. Huge thanks to John for that. I don't know about you, but that permission slip to stop chasing every shiny new tool was exactly what I needed to hear. The constant wave of new stuff is honestly quite exhausting, and it's okay to step back from the screen for a second. As service design professionals, we have a specific job here. We have to be the ones connecting these digital agents back to real human pain points. We are the bridge. So think about John's closing question today. What do you actually want your world to look like in a couple of years from now? If you've enjoyed today's conversation, you can do me one big favor. Click the like button on this video and leave a short comment if you haven't done so already. Not to feed the AI algorithms, but to let me know whether or not we are on the right track by addressing topics like this. Finally, before we part ways, please take a moment to reflect and celebrate that by joining us today, you've directed your attention towards learning and growing as a professional. So, from everybody who you are going to impact through your work, thank you for making the time and taking the commitment. My name is Marc Fonteijn, and I look forward to having you with us again for a new conversation on the Service Design Show. Take care and see you soon.